Hi YouTube, welcome to another installment in my series of video guides for Black Desert Online. This time around, we're going to be going over one of the endgame grind zones, Dehkia Ash Forest. As always, feel free to use the timestamps on the timeline below to jump around in the video to get to the information you're interested in. In this video, I'll be going over stat requirements and gear, rotations, mechanics, dangerous things to look out for because this is an endgame zone. It can get very sketchy if you don't know what to look out for, and optimal pulling, and of course the loot you get from the grind. As a bonus to this video, because a lot of people compare Dehkia Ash to normal Ash and are curious which one's better for certain things, I also grinded a bunch of normal Ash Forest alongside with all the Dehkia hours I've done, so I could show you guys a comparison of the two zones and kind of help you make your decision on which one you'd rather grind. But without further ado, let's get into it. So as I said previously, Dehkia Ash is one of the most endgame grind zones currently available in Black Desert Online, and as a result, of course, the gear and stats you need are pretty high for this spot. Up on the screen, I'll bring up my gear and the stats I was running whenever I was grinding. These stats are with full buffs, so that means I have church buff, food buff, villa, and the full elixir rotation. So that means everything, you know, comma damage, monster damage, will detection, back attack damage, just everything, the whole shebang. I used every single elixir I could here. Also, the mobs here only hit you with the knockdown CC, so if you're worried about getting CC'd, I highly recommend running 100% knockdown resist to this spot. The soft cap for this spot is 1000 AP, so you want to aim for that number, but honestly, as I'll discuss later in the video, that soft cap is a bit of a lie because you really in this spot want as much AP as possible, because the quicker you kill them, the less chance you have of dying, and like I said, later on you'll see what I mean. With that information covered, we'll talk about the rotations for the grind zone. In Dehkia Ash, rotations are pretty much exactly like other spots that have similar mechanics, like Stars and Towers, Mariv Cave Tombstones, or Dehkia Olans, which is, if you've never been to those spots, all they are is it's just centered around a single rift seed, which is similar to a totem or a tower if you're talking about Olans or Star's End, and enemies will just spawn around the seed continuously. You're not really moving from that spot, you're just grinding in one spot continuously around that rift seed. As always, I will bring up a map on the screen for you guys to take a look at. I have marked on this map the locations of all the rift seeds that I'm aware of, at least. I'm pretty sure this should be all of them. All the rotations, however, are not equal for one reason. They all have the same amount of mobs. They all have the same waves, the same number of enemies. All that's going to be the same. But the locations of each seed can be kind of detrimental because certain seeds are in the middle of a bunch of obstacles like rocks and trees, which make it a giant pain to move around and avoid enemies when you're grinding. So on the map, any spots you see marked in gold are locations of seeds which are in much more open areas that won't have as much terrain to block your movement and dodging. So keep that in mind when you're picking a rotation. But with the rotations done, we can move on to mechanics. So this spot isn't super heavy on mechanics. There's only really two mechanics in the spot. The first one is how the waves work. So as I stated before, this spot just spawns waves of enemies around the rift seed, and a new wave will only spawn when the previous wave is nearly dead. You don't have to kill the entire wave to get the next one to spawn. You just need to kill all but about 2 to 3 enemies. When there's about 2 or 3 enemies left, it is possible for the next wave to start spawning. When that spawn happens does seem to be varied pretty significantly. Sometimes it'll spawn right away, other times I have to wait a few seconds. It just seems to be on a random timer almost. The other mechanic is that every third wave of enemies will be a Barnus wave, and what this means is that with that third wave there will be a unique enemy called a Barnus, which I'll show on screen a picture of it so you guys know what I'm talking about and what to look for. The Barnus is the only ranged enemy in the grind zone, and basically you want to kill him as quickly as possible. So that's why it's important to track when the Barnus wave is happening, because if you leave him alone and he starts ranging on you, it will start to hurt pretty bad. And he can also apply debuffs to your character as well if you let him hit you with certain attacks. So it's just best to jump on him right when he spawns spawns and get rid of him. He does have a minor mechanic to him, which is when he hits 75% health and 50% health, a message will appear. This message says, "The specters of the forest awaken to call the endless resentment." This message will also appear alongside a big purple AoE, which is telegraphed on the ground. Just don't get hit by that or block it, either way. And what this message means is he has spawned an extra wave of Gyruses for you to kill. This wave is completely separate from the normal Rift Seed wave, so it is very possible where if you leave the Barnus as one of the last few enemies, the next wave could actually happen on top of all the waves that he will spawn. So when he hits 75 and 50%, this AoE and message will show up, and he'll spawn extra Gyruses for you to kill, which helps boost your trash loot and obviously gives you more chances to get, that Debo neck. Those are the two main mechanics. So quick summary: waves will only spawn when the previous wave is nearly completely killed, and every third wave is a Barnus wave. The Barnuses are ranged enemies. Make sure you burn them as quickly as possible. That's basically the mechanics for the spot. It's pretty simple, like I said, in terms of mechanics. With that done, we can move on to things to look out for, which is probably going to be the most important thing for most people because of how scary this spot is in terms of damage it throws out. Everything pretty much can kill you if you stand still for long enough, but there are certain things that will straight up one-shot you if you aren't looking for them, which is what I'm going to go over here. So first is Volcruses, which are the large enemy with scythes. They are very slow and lumbering, but they do have one specific attack which can really sneak up on you even though they're kind of slow. And that attack is essentially a block jump skill from the ninja class. And if you don't know what that skill is, basically the Volcrus will go into stealth and after a few seconds reappear on top of you and attack pretty much instantaneously. You're almost guaranteed not going to be able to react to it. And I'll show you an example of this attack on the screen as well so you can understand what it looks like when I'm talking about. This attack will absolutely one-shot you if it back attack. Now you can survive it if you do have enough DR or if you get lucky with some evasions, but the general rule is don't let this connect with your back because it is very terrifying if it does. Because this attack is out of stealth, like I said, that's why it's kind of hard to avoid it from happening. You can't see them walking up to you. You can't see them like doing an animation. They just come out of stealth and instantly hit you. So the best way to avoid this is to honestly just don't stand still. And if you don't trust that you're moving around enough to avoid any potential hits from this attack, if you move far enough away from the spot where the Volcrus moved into stealth, it won't be able to hit you with it. It'll just come out of stealth and swing it air. It won't hit you. It doesn't follow you infinitely. So if you move far enough away, it'll just whiff and you won't have to worry about it. The second thing to watch out for that can pretty much kill you almost instantly are the Gyruses, which are the smaller mobs I mentioned earlier. I'll bring up a picture of them on the screen as well so you can see what they look like. But they don't have any unique attacks to watch out for, but they're probably the most dangerous enemy in Dehkia Ash, period. That's because they move extremely quickly and their attacks basically have no startup, which means that the second they get within range of you, they'll basically instantly swing at you and hit you. Now, their individual attacks don't hurt too much, but because they move so quick, a lot of them can stack up on you very quickly, and if like 4 or 5 of them swing at you at the same time, it's basically a one-shot, especially if you let them hit you in the back. I do have an example of this happening to me. I'll show it on the screen, what it looks like when they kind of group up on you and can surprise DPS you and basically kill you or almost kill you. And the best solution for this, just like with the some of the other things in the spot, is just don't stand still for too long. Just keep moving, and that way they don't stack on you and swing at you. But those are the two things to worry about. So the Volcrus has a block jump, which can one-shot you in the back, and then don't let the Gyruses stack on you because they will absolutely obliterate you. With that, we can move on to optimal pulling. So trash per hour here greatly depends on how quickly you can group everything up. The best way to do this is right when the wave spawns, find the side where the most Volcruses are spawned next to each other. That's because Volcruses move the slowest and will take a long time to group up compared to the Gyruses. So if you just stand on top of as many of the Volcrus spawns as possible, it will really reduce the time to clear significantly because you'll be hitting more things at once more quickly. Once grouped up though, you want to mainly focus on burning the Gyrus down as quickly as possible rather than the Volcrus. And that's because of what I mentioned earlier, they're very quick, they attack very quick, so you want them to die first because they're going to be the more annoying things to dodge. They're going to be the things that are really preventing you from DPSing because of how quickly they move and attack, whereas the Volkers are much slower and lumbering, so you can get more skills off before they swing at you. The only time this grouping strategy should be ignored is whenever it's a Barnus wave. The Barnus wave, you always want to start DPSing on top of the Barnus. Let everything come to you on the Barnus, because the Barnus spawns more enemies for you to kill, which means more silver per hour. Also, it's ranged, so it's never going to group up on you anyways. And if it starts ranging you, like I said earlier, it's really going to start, you know, adding up damage and debuffs and all that. So it's better to focus on that on those waves. But that's kind of how I was clearing optimally. I was just trying to stand on the largest group of Volkerses, except for on the Barnus waves, of course, as I mentioned. That's how I did it. Last thing we're gonna go over is loot that you get from this spot. So as of recording this video, I have grinded 20 hours of Dehkia Ash. In terms of silver per hour, similar to normal Ash, Dehkia Ash really isn't good for silver at all. My average here was like 600 mil an hour, which is really bad for the gear you require to grind here. Most spots that require similar stats and gear will average you at least like 800 to 900 mil an hour, if not a bill. So it's just not really a place for money if that's what you're trying to look for. The main reason you do want to grind here though is for Dehkia necklaces, not the money, which is a very end game accessory that some people hunt for, usually as one of the last upgrades they need. Before I bring up my Garmouth hours like I usually do, I do have a bit of a disclaimer. The silver numbers you see on the Garmouth screenshot I'll bring up in a second are not accurate, and that's because recently they removed gazes from Dehkia, and when this was reflected on Garmoth, they did not add those gazes to your Debo drop info, so it looked like I was making good money without getting Debo drops. So I added the Debos in myself. You're gonna see a little bit of extra silver on certain hours where I got a gaze, and obviously Garmoth doesn't show gazes anymore, so I had to add those into the Debo count so you guys could see how many Debos I was getting. So the main thing you should look at for this video is the actual items that I got dropped on the Garmoth, not the silver number, because that number is going to be a bit off for some of the hours. But we'll bring it up on screen. So on screen you can see what I've gotten in my time here. In 20 hours I got 8 Dehkia necklaces, which translates to getting 1 Debo every 2 hours and 12 minutes. And as I said before, I also spent a bunch of time at normal Ash so I could show you guys a comparison. So I'll bring up on the screen also my normal Ash hours. Now, I didn't grind quite as long at normal Ash. At normal Ash Forest, I only grinded 15 hours. But in those 15 hours, I only got 4 Debos, which translates to getting 1 Debo every 3 hours and 44 minutes. Now, this could just be me having bad RNG on my part. I feel like 20 hours and 15 hours is a pretty good indicator, but take it however you will. But from my experience, Dehkia Ash is much better for Debo drops than normal Ash for. So I would say, honestly, based on this test, if you can do Dehkia and you're willing to put up with the gear requirement and, you know, having to sweat a bit more, it's definitely better for Debos than normal Ash. But yeah, that's all the information I got for you guys on Dehkia Ash. So in conclusion, the spot, like I said, is really bad for silver, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who's familiar with Debo grinding. But if you come here for the Debos, it's definitely worth it. In my experience, Dehkia does definitely drop them more than normal. You just have to be willing to put up with the difficulty and the gear requirement. But thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. As always, if you enjoyed the guide, please like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. I also stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/bluesky900. I do lots of fun stuff over there. I am always willing to help people out and ask and answer questions that any viewers might have about grind zones, gear, classes, whatever. So please go check that out as well. But thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.